Now I know what you're thinking. What? A re-review? Like, you never done that before. Why are you doing a re-review on the Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild? Now let me explain that to you. When I first reviewed the Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild, I was a bit harsh on the film. Okay, I know most people disagree with me on that, but harshly that I gave this film a 2 out of 10. And I kind of was a bit harsh on the story as well. So I decided to make a re-review to this film. That my opinions might have changed with this film ever since I tried watching it more times on Disney Plus until it was released on Disney Plus 25th of March in Ireland. But in case you are wondering, well, how are my opinions now with the Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild? Let's find out. Start off with the story. I would say that the story is the one thing that I was a bit too harsh on. Since I kind of get what it was trying to say. That it was trying to tell us much about the Lost World and Bucks himself. About some of the side plots, some new things about him, and wonder what the world building is like. And I don't even know why I gave the story a 1 in the first place. In that video, I really did state the positive, so what was I thinking if I give the story by a 1? But it actually does have a thing to actually continue the Ice Age franchise with a very of a smart start. Now, I'm not saying that this would be a very good story by giving this a positive rating. That it mostly sounds like something you hear from a Land Before Time sequel, but I guess I would say it does have a purpose to bring back the Ice Age franchise with a Buck Wild spin-off, but that mostly failed for obvious reasons. Since this is called the Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild, there's kind of like two plots happening that aren't really mixing well. There are another plot line that has to do with to bring back some of the original characters, where it starts off with the Possums the goal is trying to be independent, which I know that is kind of a one story that might actually give them some appeal, but since we are talking about Crash and Eddie, I just don't care about them. Since most of their appearances aren't very that good, since they're mostly the ones that said bad jokes. But I know there are some humor and some funny moments that do try to entertain the viewer. I mean, it tries, but not too often. Since this is a Buck spin-off, none of the humor can actually work to how much Buck is an oddball, or especially how stupid Crash and Eddie are. And because of that, there's nothing engaging to watch the movie. There's nothing enjoyable about the comedy. The characters aren't the kind worth rooting for, which I'll get to later. And it even has a hard time to be a Buck Wild spin-off and an Ice Age film. Seriously, it always forgets about the goal of Crash and Eddie's independence, and it can even fail the narrating with just exposition and even more flashbacks. Now I get Disney's purpose to tell Ice Age flashbacks to generational kids who wants to get into the franchise. Okay, I get what they're going for, but they're only filler and they're nothing really special. Because most of it's trying to say is stuff that longtime Ice Age fans already known about in the first place. But the story itself is very weak. Just because there's nothing engaged with into the Ice Age story, this film has a lot of problems and its predictability. Because it's obvious to tell how Buck will save the Lost World from Orson, or how Crash and Eddie want to be independent and go help others, or even themselves. Yes, I'll give it. I have improved from the story a bit since I was a bit harsh when I first listened to the story. And I guess I will say it did improve me, and it did actually kind of got me there. But however, an idea alone is not enough to make something that just feels like a complete waste of time. The one thing that people wouldn't expect this film to disappoint is the stylized animation, because the animation didn't receive a downgrade. It just went downhill to where the quality now matches with the standards of the writing. Well, you can blame blame Disney for that since Blue Sky is dead and Balder Entertainment's doing the same animation, just like in the film that they animate was Die Wimpy Kid movie for Disney Plus. I mean, there was an attempt. I would say that I will give them that there was an attempt to make what Ice Age used to establish, even if the backgrounds don't look bland and pale. They actually try to give it a while in the design of the backgrounds, and the character designs do stay true to how they always been before. But there was that one part in the animation where I used to give this animation a 4 since I guess I was a bit too positive back then. Sure, it may have a look of an Ice Age film, but the execution is what makes it noticeably worse than its predecessors. I mean, yes, the designs do have the same look as they always been before, but the character animation is completely stiff and lifeless, where the poses are not really that kind of good, and they're mostly plot out generic and not very detailed as they all do. Sure, it's easy to work in those limitations, but it's kind of a problem since this is meant to be some kind of an Ice Age film about crazy mammals fighting against dinosaurs, especially Buck Wild, who is supposed to be highly energetic and emphasizes the wild in his name for crying out loud. Not to mention that it also ruins the action scenes. Due to the film's limitations, they couldn't present the fight scenes and the chase scenes as anything grand that will get the viewer's attention. Since the action scenes come repetitive of the mammals always facing against awesome raptors, that is kind of a bit of a problem since this danger that they're describing doesn't match with the danger that they're actually showing. And after all of that consequences, the one that has to be blamed is not Disney, not the animators, and certainly not the talent. If I had to blame on someone, it's gotta be the technology. Whatever rendering power they used in this film was absolutely weak. I mean, it's easy to tell that it was nowhere near the levels of what Blue Sky made during the first film. However, let's not forget that Ice Age was made in 20 years in 2002, and there still are some details in the animation that still looks good to this day, even if it kind of looks a bit outdated at times. As for Buck Wild, the only excuses have is just to be rushed and for the sake of more content on Disney Plus. Content. It would have been fine for a TV series, but not in an animated film. And let's not forget we went from what Blue Sky made to this. Now I'm starting to question on why on earth did I give this animation a 4 out of 10 in the first place. However, there's one thing that some of the critics would actually appreciate Disney for doing, for taking out the Ice Age characters from 4 and 5. But I will say that the disappointing thing that they did was remove Peaches and Scrat. Like, seriously, Disney, why? But moving on to the characters, so let's start off with the main weasel himself, Buck Wild. The one redeeming quality I can find about Buck is that he's at least like the Buck before in Dawn of the Dinosaurs instead of the one in Collision Course. Where he's an adventurer, but he has a bit of a loony side when he talks to vegetables in his own hand. And there's one thing that we haven't learned about Buck yet until now when we saw this film, is that he was once a part of a team that kept harmony among the creatures of the Lost World. But one day when Austin defeated his team and lost most of his members, he reunites with his former partner C, who is a more of a planner that's used to Buck's quirks, as they have an ex-life relationship who have to settle the differences in order to save the Lost World. I would actually prefer this film more about Buck instead of Crash and Eddie. Well, speaking of which, yes, the Crash and Eddie are also the main characters of the film. And yes, I know they have an arc where they try to be independent and try to face their own without the help of Eddie. But however, this film barely even gives that much growth to them, and there's nothing that we can quite care about. And the only thing that these two do is the same thing they always do in every other Ice Age film. Make unfunny jokes on how idiotic they are. And then there's Orson, who is your typical bland villain. As a dino who got bullied in the past because of his big brain, he decides to rule the Lost for like a big dictator rulership with the help of some raptors that he's able to take control of. And of course, we can't have an Ice Age film without the franchise's leads, Sid, Manny, Diego, and the addition of Eddie. Because why not? Oh, I mean, she was the main character in the sequel, so I guess we just put her here instead of Peaches or Scratch. Which they have the little side plot on trying to find Crash and Eddie after they left. However, their roles are minimal since they only get here just to give reason why Crash and Eddie trying to be independent, and their appearances only show up the beginning and the end of the picture, which they could at least add more minutes to show more screen time with them, but they're just basically used as filler. Buck is the only Ice Age character who actually got his original voice actor back, Simon Pegg, while everyone else got praise, and the voice acting has mixed results in a slight change. And with the exception of Buck and Justina Machado as C, who these two actually did give a good role and good acting here. Everyone else reaches from sometimes okay and sometimes pretty bad. It mostly feels like the actors try to give up their acting skills and more try to feel like the Ice Age characters just to fit in with the voice acting. And yes, I do kind of regret giving these characters a 2 since some had some potential, but due to the Ice Age characters, they really make this another pointless waste of time to the franchise. After rewatching this film, I did have to grow up some opinions by not being harsh to this film no more, but that still not means that this is a good movie. The Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild is a terrible downgrade to the film that Disney only made this film just to have the same success as the original. The story is unengagingly dull. The animation has a terrible downgrade. The action scenes are weak. Some of the dialogue ain't that quite impressive at times, and the characters are a good reason why this franchise is a headache more than actually fun. And I just would recommend just watch Dawn of the Dinosaurs instead of this film. I mean, yes, it's not as good as the original, but it's at least a better version, alright? Right. But if you excuse me, I'm just going to prepare for Ice Age 7. Oh, and also here's the seal of bad, just in case you were wondering there.